Good afternoon, everyone.
Hi,
Hello.
John.
How are
wanna-
y'all today?
Introductions, since you haven't met everyone.
Yeah, go ahead and introduce.
Everett, do you want to start?
I'm Everett Brock, Alderman, City of Icon. I'm Steve Harvey, an Alderman with the city. I'm Stacy Harvey, not Steve's brother, Alderman.
Be Rutledge HR.
Nolan Main, City Administrator.
We also have Scotty, our IT guru in the corner, who's going to help us today.
Okay. I'm John Grubbs. I'm an HR consultant with UTM Task for Middle Tennessee. And I think, Ryle, I think you're muted there. Yeah, you got, I think you're muted.
Ryle Chastain, City Mayor.
Okay. It's great to meet all of y'all. Libby, did you share with them any the constructs that I sent you, basically our talking points for today, job
Yes.
analysis form?
I did. I just sent the copies. Ryle, I'll send you an email of all this stuff. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay. So I guess the first question is, do you all have points that you would like to discuss before I kind of explain the process? I'll take that as a no.
I don't have any beforehand.
Okay. So to kind of go back to the beginning, you all are selecting a community development director. You've posted the position. You've got a list of, included in the job description and job announcement, you've got a list of minimum qualifications. And once the city, you all, have selected those individuals to proceed forward, part of that selection process, or part of the information that you will look at, is the assessment center results. And that's where IMPAS comes in to help. And we'll be on site to facilitate that. The first step, obviously, was we met with Nolan, Libby, Keith, Stacy, and Bobby to talk about what behavioral competencies the assessment center needs to observe, the assessors need to classify, record, and evaluate. And the assessment center is a behavioral observation process. It does not measure how much they know about a subject, or it doesn't verify their education on a subject, nor does it necessarily ferret out subject matter experience and expertise, but it does look at behaviors, assuming that all candidates have the minimum required knowledge, skills, education, certification, and so forth to be considered. This helps you all select, because the exercises contained in an assessment center, typically, all of our assessment centers contain a structured interview where a panel interviews them and asks them behavioral questions, past experience, past behavior questions. It doesn't have to be in the realm of planning or codes, but some of the behaviors can be otherwise illustrated. But ideally, I hope I didn't mute myself. Ideally, they would give us some behavioral example from their past experience in that arena. So in order to observe those, we have defined some primary competencies and subcompetencies, and summarized those in the job analysis form that I've sent Libby and she shared. The primary areas are problem solving, their approach to work, comportment, and comportment just really means how, I hate to say attitude, but how they align themselves with the needs of the organization and stakeholders being homeowners in the area, builders, developers, anyone who needs the services of the planning and codes community development area. And then how they communicate, primarily in this arena, oral communication and listening, not focusing as much on the written. It is important, but how they communicate orally, because that's going to be very important dealing with, members of the community, developers and so forth, and their relational abilities. So we've got those 5 primary buckets. So under problem solving, we have basic problem solving, then information seeking, creativity, and solution seeking. Approach to work, how they plan and organize, and how adaptable they are to various situations and circumstances. Under comportment, stress tolerance, conscientiousness, which is essentially their attention to detail, and their motivation. Under communication, their oral and listening skills, oral communication and listening skills. And relational is very important. Interpersonal skills, leadership, teamwork, and political savvy. Political savvy particularly because they need to understand how politics are played, but they also need to not actively stir the pot and participate in political gamesmanship. So looking at those primary behavioral constructs, those are ones that we're going to focus on. And using those, we will design the structured interview. We'll also design some simulations. Simulations are exercises that they'll participate in, probably 2. Typically, the variety of exercises could entail role plays where they do one-on-one role plays, a group role play where they interact with a group pretending to be Board of Zoning and Appeals, for example. Sometimes there are case presentations, and sometimes there are, press conferences and a variety of simulations. So the ones that we use will be designed to look at these particular behaviors. And within those exercises, the assessors will be trained in advance on the assessment center process, but particularly on what to look for in this assessment center so that they can observe these behaviors, differentiate, and not necessarily, and it's human nature to compare candidate to candidate to candidate, but we're going to provide a rubric of unacceptable, acceptable, exceptional, and they're going to rate each behavior as it was illustrated based on the rubric. And that rubric will describe what those 3 levels or gradients in between would look like to them as the candidates perform in these exercises. So it's kind of like a performance evaluation, but in a simulated environment. So it will give feedback to fit, not necessarily can they turn the wrench or dig the ditch or anything physical or mental per se, but it will let you know if and to what degree each candidate aligns behaviorally with the things that your city values in selecting this position. So I'll stop talking and see if there are any questions thus far or observations.
Sure.
We don't have any yet.
Okay. So looking at these behaviors, I'll be working with Libby to finalize the exercises. We're arranging for a panel of assessors. Assessors will be external to your organization. We'll have a human resources person from another city there. We'll have an individual on the panel who is very experienced as a planning and codes director, the most experienced in the state as far as understanding the planning side, as well as building and codes, been very involved in both for a 20+ year career. And I was waiting actually until we got the final, which Libby has provided, the list of final candidates, and intentionally so because, for example, we've got an individual from the city of Manchester. One of my potential panelists was an individual from the city of Manchester. So now naturally I have to exclude that person and replace with another individual. So I want to make sure there's no overlap. No one who works with someone or has worked closely with someone is spending time on the assessment panel. So we've got 2 more to get. I've got 2 wrapped up. We'll be working on that. Let's pull my calendar up. The assessment center is scheduled for the 15th and 16th of July. I'm tentatively planning assessor training on the 12th of July via Zoom so we can ensure that the assessors are squared away before they show up on site. I'll be there the 14th on site to do any on-site prep that's needed, and then we'll conduct it the 15th and 16th. If we have 6 panelists, if all 6 of these final panelists go through, we should be able to clearly do it in 2 days. So how do you feel about the process so far?
I like it. I mean, it sounds, I'm glad I'm not going through it. I'll say that. But I mean, what you're talking about seems to be a good, kind of test of how they will do. So, I mean, as much as I've looked over it, I seems good to me. I don't see how a social representative is going to trick this process.
Right. Yeah,
Do it.
it's hard to fake, especially once you combine your assessment of who to select with their knowledge, skills, and abilities, and then incorporate this into the other characteristics. And there's also another layer that you can add. Let's say you get down to 2 or 3 final candidates, and they're still pretty close. We can provide through a third party, and at a cost, it's $250 per assessment for this individual to provide. But they will send a link to the finalists, if you so choose, and have them take a California psychological inventory. And this individual is PhD in industrial organizational psychology and can perform an analysis based on the competencies that you've defined and give you a narrative and let you know whether or not they have faked within that spectrum. We would need a little lead time on that if you so chose. It happens sometimes that cities opt to include that. Probably 30% of the cities do, and for department head positions or city administrator, city manager positions. It's not a requirement, but it does add an extra layer of checking. Now, like you said, I feel it's difficult to win or to fake through this using just personality ethic instead of performance character ethic. So it's fairly rigorous. I've heard several candidates that have gone through these over the years, so this is the hardest thing I've ever been through, and that's good because it forces them to. Well, if someone has 2 hours to prepare for one question or 2 days to prepare for a presentation, they can build in some faking. Typically, what we do and what we would do in this case is while one candidate is interviewing, the other would be spending 30 minutes prepping on a situation that is completely unknown to them prior. So they couldn't spend 30 minutes, even if they have their phone, they couldn't learn on the fly to the degree that they would need to illustrate competency and the content and the behaviors when illustrating competency in the content show through.
So in these situations, is there any time to prepare at all, or is it just strictly off the cuff?
We do give them some prep time, and that varies depending on the exercise, the simulation that we're utilizing. For example, if someone has to do a one-to-one role play on a scenario dealing with an employee or a developer or a disgruntled homeowner or whatever is chosen, we will sit them in a room, give them a narrative one pager of the situation, and they'll have scratch paper or what have you. And they prepare for that half hour. And then when they come in and present, they present, then turn the paperwork into us so it's not left and laying around for others to see. So we keep a controlled environment, but we do allow them reasonable preparation time when warranted. Obviously, no prep for the interview panel. There are some, if we were looking more in the technical capacity, for example, we were selecting a fire chief, one of the exercises may be where the city's discussing where to place the new fire hall based on reduction of the ISO rating and community needs and community diversity and so forth and so on. We may give a lot of information and a lot of data, a stack, and give them an hour to prepare that, or 2 hours, depending on the complexity. But for a role play, we would typically give 30 minutes.
Can we give you any suggestions as to one of the things that we would like to have you role play?
Sure.
If one of our
Well, let me, before we get into the details, and here's why I want to pause that for just a second.
Sure.
This is recorded and it's public, right?
Yes.
Right.
Some individuals may know to access this to gain information. So
maybe I better pass it on to Libby, and she can do it for you.
yes, I just want to safeguard any leaking of what we'll be looking at, because no one needs to have an unfair advantage. But yes, get with Libby and she can send that along as well.
Is there anything you need from us, John? Is there anything that we can do to further this process?
No, you all are giving me everything I need. Libby's being very supportive and coordinating on your end. Nolan's being very supportive and moving the process forward. So everything's cooking with gas. Everything's going well, but thank you very much.
Well, everybody but Libby is kind of new to this process. So
Yes, Libby was kind enough to serve on a selection panel that we did for Tullahoma, and she did really, really well there, by the way. And so I believe she saw value in this process and its application to this need. So
I know you already told us, but how many did you say are there in the assessment besides the candidate?
we're planning on having 4 assessors. We like to have 3 to 5 typically. I'm going to attempt to have a minimum of 4.
How long have you been using this procedure?
Oh man, I've been using it at MTAS for 5 or 6 years. I've been doing
We've just
something.
never run across it before.
Yeah. MTAS has been doing it for 20. I've been involved outside of MTAS in similar processes, almost identical processes for probably 10 or 15 years. But MTAS started doing it about 20 years ago. And you'd be surprised how few cities are aware that we do this and that we don't charge for it. So I'm not surprised you haven't heard of it. Kind of flies under the radar sometimes.
Hi, Ron. You're on the big screen. You're on the big screen, so you made a noise or something and then Zoom meeting jumped to you like you're gonna speak.
Oh, I don't know. I'm just listening.
Well, if anyone has any suggestions on scenarios or anything, send them through Libby. Obviously, we'll consider those and their applicability and how they can be observed and demonstrated as far as behavioral. But that's all I have to present right now.
Everybody good?
Yeah, I think
Feeling
so.
warm and fuzzy? No questions?
I'm glad he's doing it, not us.
Well, that's
Thank
what
you.
I'm here for. Hey, thank you all for letting us help, because if you didn't let us help, have a job. So,
Thank you for your time. Yeah, I appreciate it.
anytime. But thank you all.
Thank you.